Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young. This is a weekly podcast where we explore the strengths we have because of our sensitivity and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hey there. To the creatives, healers, sensitives, and deep thinkers, how the heck are you? I have been putting off recording and feeling really nervous. I have a client in 20 minutes, so this is going to be a pretty short episode unless I choose to add more later on, but I just thought better do it scared than not do it at all. How have you all been doing? I'm recording this almost the end of May of 2025. I put a pause on the podcast in August of 2024. This is the longest break that I've ever taken. I'm really struggling with how much information to give you and still honor and respect Jen's privacy. I spoke with a colleague and a friend who has very different ideas about self-disclosure, and it's really made me question how much is okay to share about another person and their experience without their consent and without them hearing it. I believe that I try and do it as respectfully as I can, but it's definitely bringing up some self-doubts. I think what I can tell you is Jen and I worked really hard, I think all the way through probably November, trying to work things through. I paid for an appointment for us to meet with my therapist for an hour and a half. My therapist met with Jen, then she talked to me a little bit first, met with both of us, and then wrapped up with just me. Jen and I really tried, and it just didn't work. And I think probably about October, November, I sent a very, very thoughtful email to her saying I needed to take a break because my expectations, and it just was really challenging for me. And I told her how much I loved her and cared and loved the times that we had when we were connected. I wasn't sure if our relationship was for a season or if we needed to take a break and we would be able to come back to it. Like, I just didn't know, but it was incredibly heartfelt. I remember sending it to my therapist to have her take a look at it just to make sure that I wasn't missing anything. Sent it to Jen and got a response back from Jen that said, thanks for letting me know. If you want to talk, let me know. It was very brief. And that was the last communication that I've had with Jen. What I can tell you is that my OCD was at an all-time high. I started medication while Jen and I were still working on our relationship. And once I didn't have contact with Jen, my OCD went from probably an 8 or a 9, pretty much down to a 0, maybe a 1. I have little baby flares, but nothing like the constant activation that I had when we were trying to work things out. I think we both had a part in it, and I think that's pretty much all that I want to say. Other than it's really okay that relationships don't last for forever. I'm really looking at this right now for myself and knowing that I want to have relationships with people and I want to show up, and if they work, great, and if they don't, that's okay too. And for some reason, we are given the message that relationships need to be forever. We need to have childhood friends. We need to have lots of close friends. Being neurodivergent and learning about myself and how I show up and having relationships that are reciprocal is really important to me. And what I'm really learning to look at right now is what is the capacity of other people? And again, this is not about Jen, so I'm having some high reactivity about feedback I've received. What is the capacity of other people? When people tell you what their limitations are, do you listen and honor? I think I give people so much room and so much latitude that people let me know what their limitations are, and I don't take that into account, or I think I can move above and beyond it. It almost reminds me of my first marriage and the message that we get from Disney movies. If you love someone enough that they will change. If you love a beast long enough, he will turn into whatever the beast turned into. I'm not implying that anybody is unlovable, but this idea of if we just show up and love people unconditionally, we can bring out the best in them. And it's not that that's not true, but if people have limitations and they're telling us or showing us their limitations, do we listen to that? Do we take that into account? And I have to tell you that for quite a few months, I really pulled back from relationships because I was so afraid that I would recreate the same thing that happened with Jen. And I can't look back and point to it. I sort of can. I think that when Jen started to date, that's when my OCD, I think, got activated the most. And I had things that were activated. Jen had things that were activated. And I would say we both had stuff that was going on that made it very challenging for us. But it's not like I can see a specific moment when this happened. And I felt like we were being incredibly open and transparent and communicating with each other. It just had a limited lifetime for that friendship. And it felt very scary for me to start new friendships. I was so afraid I would recreate the same thing over again. I was incredibly unmasked with Jen and felt so at ease. I've been very mindful in the new friendships that I'm having and just being attentive and aware and trying to figure out, am I masking? Am I not masking? Am I being contained? Was I enmeshed with Jen? It's a process, y'all. It's definitely a process. What I can tell you is I'm starting to connect and reconnect with people and really enjoying friendships. Finding some new people to connect with, connecting with people that have been on the periphery. It is not the same as when Jen and I were close. These are different types of relationships. And I'm just learning how to do friendship at almost 62 years of age. And that's okay. That's really okay. I've been talking with a colleague and we've been working together on creating a new podcast together that would be separate from this one. And when we talked about our concerns, or I don't have concerns about self-disclosure, it really clarified for me that the gift that I have is to show up authentically and to tell everyone, to tell you, the listener, what's going on. It is a little bit harder that my life has been for the most part, very quiet and calm. There's not a lot going on. And I sometimes feel like I don't have a lot to talk about. I can tell you that the OCD meds also make my mind pretty quiet. And there's not a lot of drama. And so many of the episodes that I've recorded have been when I'm upset and I'm activated and I'm having a hard time, or people have said and done things that are hurtful. So I have this fear in my mind that I don't know that I can generate enough regular content weekly for you. What I will probably try and do is record something short, maybe 20 to 30 minutes weekly for you. I may even record a bunch of episodes ahead of time to make sure that this is going to be sustainable. I really didn't think that the podcast was that much work until I stopped doing it. And it was really nice to not have to do all of the things that I was doing. And so to start it up again and doing it differently, because I'm going to do things on a much smaller scale right now, at least until the other podcast gets off the ground. And I'm reluctant to tell you anything until I know for sure that we're going to be pulling it together. And it's very different working with someone else. And it was interesting on our first meeting. Now, understand, when I started the podcast with Jen, it was my podcast and I asked her to join me, and she did, and she was lovely. But the whole podcast was mine and it was my job to do everything. And when I was talking with a friend about starting a podcast, I said I should probably get a Google sheet together so that we can communicate. And my friend said, I hope you don't mind, but I love doing Google Sheets. So do you mind if I do it? And I said, no, I would love that. But I felt like the responsibility was mine. And we were talking about which platform do we want to record on. And one of them gives some AI notes and it transcribes the recording so that I can put it into another AI and generate more things for show notes, which makes it a lot easier for me. And my friend was saying, well, I can split those costs with you, and coming up with a logo. And we worked on a logo the other day. I want to tell you about that experience. And the thought of not having to do everything alone just felt like such a relief. And there's a part of me that felt very proprietary because we hadn't decided at that point if we were going to redo this podcast and change the name and move forward, or if we were going to start a new podcast. What I did learn is we were looking at logos together. They're very creative and we're designing some logos. And I love bright, vivid colors, and I find that just visually very interesting. And they like calmer colors and feel overwhelmed by the brightness of the colors that I like. They like to have lots of different elements on a logo. And for me, if there's not a reason for an element to be there, I like the simplicity of bright, vivid colors, but no extra things. And we were looking at logos of brains. And when I was going to change the name of this podcast to Unapologetically Sensitive and Autistic, I was working with my son on creating a logo that all of the logos that I saw for brains end up looking like either intestines or cabbage, cauliflower, when we would put them onto the background that we were looking at. And the person I was working with likes what I consider more cartoonish brains. And for me, that just is so not my aesthetic. And I really didn't know if we were going to be able to agree on anything, because we would look at something that had bright colors on it and they would make it transparent, more transparent. And I said, if we were in the same room together, I'd sneak over to the computer and raise the transparency up to make it more vivid. We did end up agreeing on something that I think is just beautiful. I'm not going to share anything with you about the new podcast until I know that it's going to be a go and we've got something solid, but it's just interesting in working with someone. And then when I wasn't sure if we were going to continue this podcast and rebrand it or start a new one, again, I felt very attached to the music, and this podcast is my baby. And I just have a lot of self-doubt about being able to generate content and enough cohesive content for an episode. And like most things, it's really about just being scared, being unsure, being doubtful, and doing it anyways. And can that be enough? I am looking at time, and I'm going to wrap this up because I do have a client. I hope that you are all well. I hope it's nice to have the podcast back. If you're interested in working with me, I have a couple of slots open. You can reach out to me at unapologeticallysensitive.com. If you have any feedback about this episode, or if you have ideas or topics or things you would like for me to talk about, letters that you want me to read and tell you what my thoughts are, if I'm able to, feel free to send me an email at unapologeticallysensitive@gmail.com. Remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's how you're wired. It's okay to have hard times. It's okay to feel lonely. It's okay to feel lonely when you're with a bunch of people. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to be happy, joyful, stimmy. It's okay to be quiet and reserved. It's okay to want to be out and doing things. It's okay to want to be in your bed, in your home where it's cozy and comfy. There is no way that you can screw up being who you are, because who you are is really okay, even when it feels like you're not okay. You are enough. You are perfect as you are. You're wired differently, and finding people that are wired like you can really make a difference. And if you have that, great. And if you don't have it, that's also okay. I think that's all I have. Have a blessed day.